Good day everyone, Dr. Polaris here. When I was a young cub, I was fascinated by the idea that dinosaurs and other prehistoric animals might still roam the earth. In my mind, back in those early days, it seemed completely plausible to me that all of the so-called cryptids, from the Yeti to the Loch Ness Monster, were just waiting to still be discovered. I had heard that animals like the coelacanth had essentially survived undetected for 65 million years, and thought, well, if they can do it, then why not supposedly any other extinct animals? Therefore, it was almost inevitable that the Mokele Mbembe would grab my attention. I mean, a living sauropod lurking in the seemingly primordial, undiscovered wilds of the Congo? What dinosaur-obsessed kid is not going to be interested in that? However, as my teenage years progressed and I began to research the subject more thoroughly, doubts began to creep into my mind. They began with niggling questions like, why has nobody ever been able to photograph or capture this animal, and where is the physical evidence for it? It was then that I came to the sad realization that my childhood fantasy was no more than just wishful thinking. There are no sauropods in the Congo, and there have not been for 65 million years. But, despite the fact that not a single shred of evidence for this creature's existence has come to light, numerous expeditions to the Congo have been mounted to find the Mokele Mbembe. Crowdfunding campaigns have been organised, creationist ministers have sent their own money and ventures to the region, and cryptozoologists online cling to the beast's existence like a dog to its favourite chew toy. This video will attempt to answer these questions and more, but for now let's start with a single basic question. What is the Mokele Mbembe? Let's start with that name. Mokele Mbembe, meaning one who stops the flow of rivers in the Lingala language, is a being from the folklore of the Congo River Basin. It is said to be a water-dwelling creature, or spirit of some kind, very often claimed to be of a large size and having an aggressive nature. In interviews undertaken with Congolese tribespeople, the beast is described as having greyish skin, being herbivorous in nature, and sometimes possessing a long horn on its snout. The oldest reference to what may be described as evidence of such a creature comes from the 18th century. In the 1776 book History of the Loango, Kakonga and Other Kingdoms of Africa by Levin Bonaventure Proyard, sorry if I mangled the pronunciation of that name, a French missionary to the Congo River region. Among many other observations about the flora, fauna and native inhabitants related in his book, Bonaventure claimed to have seen enormous footprints in the region. The creature that left the prints was not witnessed, but Bonaventure wrote that it must have been monstrous. The marks of the claws were noted on the ground, and these formed a print about 3 feet in circumference. When later European explorers and big game hunters heard of these tales at the turn of the 20th century, the Mokele Mbembe was almost immediately identified to be a potential living sauropod dinosaur. This was most likely to do with the fact that, during the early 20th century, the world was experiencing something of a dinosaur craze. As paleontologist Dr. Darren Naish has stated, the museums of the day were racing to obtain and install complete skeletons of Diplodocus, Brontosaurus, Apatosaurus and their relatives. Huge fanfare and public interest surrounded the display of these dinosaurs, the very first of which was mounted in New York and London in 1905. Interest in sauropod fossils fueled interest and excitement in living ones. The very first accounts of the Mokele Mbembe certainly took advantage of this dinosaur boom. 1909 saw the first mention of a brontosaurus-like creature dwelling in the Congo. In Beasts and Men, the autobiography of famed big game hunter Carl Hagenbeck, the hunter claimed to have heard from 2 independent sources about a creature living in Rhodesia which was described to them by natives as half elephant, half dragon. Naturalist Joseph Menges had also told Hagenbeck about similar stories. Hagenbeck speculated that it could only be some kind of dinosaur, seemingly akin to the Brontosaurus. Another of Hagenbeck's sources, Hans Schomburg, asserted that while at Lake Bangweulu he noted the lack of hippopotamus. His guides informed him of a large hippo-killing creature that lived in Lake Bangweulu. It is important to note that all of these accounts derive from Zambia, Rhodesia and South Africa, not the Congo or Cameroon, the regions where the Mokele Mbembe is said to frequent. At this early stage in the development of the Mokele Mbembe lore, people latched onto the idea that any wild region in Africa might be home to living relatives of Brontosaurus or Diplodocus. This view derives from a naive, colonialist attitude that saw Africa as the dark continent, a place that had hardly changed since the time of the dinosaurs and represented a real version of Conan Doyle's Lost World novel. However, this interpretation is not realistic in any sense, as Africa has witnessed the evolution and development of a diverse range of animals, including elephants, apes, and various ruminant groups which evolved on the continent. Even the so-called primordial jungles of the Congo region are actually quite young in geological terms, and their size has waxed and waned considerably over time. During the last ice age, they were almost completely replaced by savanna grasslands, which totally undermines the idea that these forests have remained unchanged and stagnant since the Cretaceous. Another significant report comes from the writings of Captain Ludwig Freiherr von Stein zur Lausnitz, sorry about the pronunciation once again, who was ordered to conduct a survey of the German colonies in what is now Cameroon in 1913. He heard stories of an enormous reptile alleged to live in the jungles, and included a description of the beast in his official report. According to Willy Ley, von Stein reported his words with utmost caution, knowing it might be seen as being unbelievable. Nonetheless, von Stein thought the tales were credible. Trusted native guides had related the tales to him, and the stories were related by independent sources, yet featured many of the same details. Though von Stein's report was never formally published, portions of it were included in later works, including a 1959 book by Ley. His description of the beast became the definitive image of the Mokele Mbembe and deserved to be quoted in full. Von Stein wrote, "The animal is said to be of a brownish-grey colour with a smooth skin, its size approximately that of an elephant, at least that of a hippopotamus. It is said to have a long and very flexible neck, and only one tooth, but a very long one. Some say it is a horn. A few spoke about a long, muscular tail like that of an alligator. Canoes coming near it are said to be doomed. The animal is said to attack the vessels at once and kill the crews, but without eating their bodies. The creature is said to live in caves that have been washed out by the river in the clay of its shores at sharp bends. It is said to climb the shores even at daytime in search of food. Its diet is said to be entirely vegetable." This feature disagrees with the possible explanation as a myth. "The preferred fruit was shown to me. It is a kind of liana with large white blossoms, with a milky sap and apple-like fruits. At the Sombo River I was shown a path said to be made by the animal in order to get to its food. The path was fresh, and there were plants of the described type nearby. But since there were too many tracks of elephants, hippos, and other large mammals, it was impossible to make out a particular spoor with any amount of certainty." Such vivid accounts stimulated substantial interest in capturing a live specimen of the creature. The Smithsonian expedition of 1919 to 1920 would be the first of many, many ventures to the Congo with the aim of finding the Mokele Mbembe. The actions of the Smithsonian expedition, as described by cryptozoologists anyway, sounds like the plot for an unreleased Indiana Jones movie. According to Lauren Coleman and Patrick Huet, authors of The Field Guide to Lake Monsters, a 32-man expedition was sent to Africa from the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. between 1919 and 1920. The objective of this expedition was to secure additional specimens of plants and animals, preferably ones that have been yet described by science. Moving picture photographers from the Universal Film Company accompanied the expedition in order to document life of the interior of the African continent. The African guides hired by the tour found large, unexplained tracks along the bank of a river, and later, in a swamp, the team heard mysterious roars which had no resemblance with any known animal. However, the expedition was to end in tragedy. During a train ride through a flooded area where an entire tribe was said to have seen the dinosaur, the locomotive suddenly derailed and turned over. 4 team members were crushed to death under the cars, and another half dozen were seriously injured. Of course, no evidence of the Mokele Mbembe's existence was recovered, with the team returning sadly empty-handed. Aside from a few reports from the 1920s and 30s, no substantial developments occurred until 1966, when Ivan Riedel took a picture of a large footprint with 3 toes, northeast of Lubombo, apparently significant as hippos, who also inhabit the region, have 4 toes. The footprint in question bears no resemblance to those of sauropods known from fossil trackways, but certainly does resemble the foot shape present in outdated, early 20th century depictions of these animals. In fact, if anything, Riedel's tracks more closely resemble those of large ornithischian dinosaurs, but you don't hear anyone arguing that they must have been the Congo as well. Well, I'm sure somebody out there does, but that's not the point. It's also a bit suspicious that interest in searching for the Mokele Mbembe started to wane in the 30s, 40s and 50s at the exact same time that the early 20th century dinosaur craze was starting to fizzle out. During the middle part of the century, dinosaurs were increasingly seen as uninteresting evolutionary failures, and their initial novelty had started to wear off. They were reduced to the status of monsters designed to entertain children, sell products, and little else. Aside from Riedel's photograph, renewed impetus to search for the creature only resurfaced in the 1970s, when the beginnings of the dinosaur renaissance propelled these ancient animals into the spotlight once again. Thank you for listening, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that video. Join me next time when we'll be looking at some of the more modern searches for the Mokele Mbembe. Don't forget, leave a like, comment and subscribe to help my fledgling channel get off the ground. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you again soon. Cheerio.